What is up, Mizzou fans? Welcome back to another video on my channel. My name is Josh Fan of ShowMeFootball.com, covering your Missouri Tigers. And today I am joined by my co-host, Brayden Dowers, and we're here to break down, or preview, I should say, the Mizzou-Boston College game, the only ranked matchup taking place this weekend as the number 6 Missouri Tigers take on number 24 ranked Boston College. And Brayden, this is an interesting matchup, one that should have gotten College game day, in my opinion. Really doesn't make sense. I mean, because let's just get this out of the way first. So we have a ranked matchup, the only ranked matchup of the week, going on between two teams who don't play each other that often. No. And also it's two teams that aren't typically in the spotlight that often either. And it's like, what do we have to do? What do we have to do to get College game day, Brayden?
I think if Oklahoma's chugging along at a good pace later in the year and they're in a position to maybe make the playoffs, then maybe we can get game day for that. And that's assuming that Mizzou's in a really good spot as well. I don't know what it's going to take to get game day back in front of the columns, but this week felt like a really good week for them to do so. South Carolina and LSU doesn't really make too much sense. Like, sure, South Carolina beat the shit out of Kentucky. That was very unexpected. But at the same time, it's like Kentucky just looked really bad, and there was a lot less of South Carolina looking fantastic because Kentucky's quarterback and their run game, I mean, it just went nowhere, and they tried the same stuff over and over again, and it was so easy for South Carolina to stop. And LSU,
Brock Vandegrift is terrible, and like I'll stand by like that being almost nearly the sole reason why Kentucky lost so badly. Because I actually saw a tweet like a few minutes before we started recording, and Brock Vandegrift was the second worst quarterback in terms of accuracy so far this season. And I think, and I could have read it wrong or I could be remembering it wrong, but I think the one quarterback worse than him was actually Jackson Arnold.
That's funny. But no, like that South Carolina Kentucky game was painful to watch. Not a good football game whatsoever. And then you have LSU, who allowed 21 points to Nicholls State and lost to USC. So you have a 1-1 LSU team versus a 2-0 South Carolina team that barely squeaked by Old Dominion, who lost to East Carolina and former Mizzou quarterback Jake Garcia last week. So you have a team that almost lost to a bad Old Dominion team and a team that lost to USC and allowed 21 points to an FCS school at home because Blake Baker's not a good defensive coordinator, apparently. And you're going to game day for that over Boston College, who just beat FSU. And while I think FSU is just completely dog shit this year, and it's really funny, you have Thomas Castellanos, who is a very exciting quarterback to watch. They have a good run game. Bill O'Brien is a good football coach. I think that people have forgotten that point, is that Bill O'Brien is a good football coach. People don't remember that Bill O'Brien got a 9-7 Houston Texans team led by Brian Hoyer to the playoffs. Sure, they got bounced by the Chiefs 30-0, but he still won 9 games at quarterback with Brian Hoyer at quarterback. That's crazy. Like,
I think Bill O'Brien, he gets unfairly viewed because his biggest downfall was he was also allowed to be the general manager.
Yeah, that's the only reason why I think that he's not still in Houston, is because he got to be the GM as well, and he had control over that roster, which didn't work well. Like, giving him that many responsibilities was never a good idea. So seeing him being the head coach at Boston College now, being in a lot smaller of a position than being the Alabama offensive coordinator or the New England Patriots offensive coordinator again, like he was last year, and having that kind of smaller role at a smaller school where there's a lot less pressure and he can just focus on coaching football and not all these massive spotlights. And he's putting himself in the spotlight because Boston College has played so well through the first 2 weeks, they absolutely destroyed Duquesne last week. And then obviously that FSU game where they just dominated. Again, I think that's a lot more because FSU is just a really bad team, but Boston College is also not a team that Mizzou needs to overlook whatsoever because they played really well that game.
Okay, so to begin this preview, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here at the beginning because I put this question out on Twitter on the Show Me Football Twitter page, and I asked, are you guys nervous about this game, Mizzou fans? Why or why not? So I'll just ask the same question to you, Brayden. Are you nervous about this game at all?
I'm nervous to an extent. I think that Boston College is battle tested already. Like they've gone into a top 10 team preseason ranked, but like they still went into FSU. That's not an easy place to play. It's not easy to play in Tallahassee, even if FSU is bad. It's not easy to play under the lights in Tallahassee. So for them to go in there and just dominate, that's impressive. They're a battle-tested team already, whereas Mizzou has only played an FCS school in Buffalo. Like Murray State and Buffalo are not teams that you really get to see what your team is about. And sure, we have some ideas on what they can be, but this is going to be Mizzou's first test of the year. And we didn't really think that it was going to be too much of a test coming into this week, but with what Boston College did to FSU, it's definitely going to be a little bit more of a game, I think, than what we initially thought, because Thomas Castellanos is a good quarterback. Corey Flagg, the linebacker that we got from Miami, he's gone up against Thomas Castellanos before. And we have another former ACC player, and they were talking about just how good of a quarterback he is. In like, we cannot overlook Boston College whatsoever. And I know that Drink is remembering that 2021 game where we lost in overtime to them. That's one game that I'll never forget, and just how painful it was to lose that, because that was definitely a low point for Drink and his Mizzou tenure. So I think that this week is a little bit personal for him because he wants to get revenge on this school, and everybody that was there for that Boston College game is going to remember. I think there's only 3 players on the active roster that saw that game and play meaningful snaps during it. So hopefully they can get some revenge. And
I know Brady Cook and Johnny Walker were 2 of them. Can't remember the third.
Well, Brady Cook was Mookie Cooper played during that game. Cook didn't get any meaningful snaps, but he was there on the sideline because Bazelak was still the quarterback. I am a little nervous. I feel like I'm more confident about like this being a top 25 matchup. I'm pretty confident about it. Like this is probably the most confident I've been facing another top 25 team ever, which is never a good thing as a Mizzou fan. But I do feel fine. Like I'm a lot less nervous than I thought that I would be, but I do respect Boston College as an opponent just because of what they've done so far. And we know that they are battle tested. We are not. They have that experience. We don't. So we just have to, like, if we come out of the gate strong, I don't think it's going to be too much of a problem, but that's a pretty big if, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I agree with just about everything. I do. I mean, okay, so you have to be at least a little bit nervous just because it is college football, and like you can lose this game. Okay,
like I was a little bit nervous for Buffalo because of how all the other top 25 teams had looked against FBS schools that day. Like you have Northern Illinois beating Notre Dame. You are reminded anything can happen. Like, so yeah, I went into the Buffalo game a little bit nervous, and I will go into the Boston College game probably a little bit more nervous, but at the same time, managing my expectations and what I think about this team, I think they'll do fine.
Yeah, so I agree, and I think this team though is very much prepared for this game because, as you mentioned, Drinkwitz, he talked about, went on the record how this was like the most embarrassing loss of his young coaching career, and he'll never forget that. And I will also say that that game was a direct result of Barry Odom leaving the talent cupboard completely bare. That's my opinion. But the roster has been heavily turned over since that game by Drinkwitz, and that's why you have a top 6 team heading into this game. But Drinkwitz, I think, is going to get these guys focused, which is, of course, the job of the head coach. But I think this game has a little bit of extra meaning for Drinkwitz because that's just not a program that you should be losing to. And it happened here under his watch. And that's just something that is going to motivate a coach. And I think that's important because a lot of these guys, as you already mentioned, were not here for that first game a couple years ago. So it's up to Drink to let them know how important this game is for him and for the program. Just kind of getting revenge in this one. Going into week 3 this year, and I've said this, even after the first 2 games, even though it's like a slow start on offense, we still have been fairly efficient. We just haven't been really getting the explosive plays. We've been running the ball super well. And the offense is still way ahead of where it was this time last year. And I said it at the beginning of the season. I feel like this year, this team kind of knows who they are and they're confident in who they are. And so last year it was like those first few games, Mizzou was like, okay, we think we're good, but like we just haven't seen ourselves play well yet. And then, of course, there was the K-State game, right? And the K-State game really gave them the confidence going forward for the rest of the season. But I think Mizzou already has confidence. So they have that kind of hurdle, that mental hurdle out of the way. This game reminds me a lot of Memphis last year. Memphis ended up being a really, really solid team that I think they finished 9-3 last year, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And they had
2. Like they're one of the best group of 5 schools.
And of course they weren't ranked at the time, but they could have very well been ranked going into that matchup, knowing what we know now. And so I view this game in a similar light. It's still a game Mizzou should win. Could Boston College make it interesting at some points if Mizzou is caught looking ahead? Sure. But I still think this is a game that Mizzou should win by multiple scores. The line is at 16.5. I kind of see Mizzou winning by like 14 points.
Yeah. I don't think that we cover that big of a line against this Boston College team, but like just get in, get out, get a win. Like that's all that I'm really asking.
Just like Memphis last year. Like Memphis was good enough to give us a little bit of a run there. But ultimately, you never thought we were going to lose the game or anything like that.
Yeah. Like the momentum of that Memphis game, even though there were times in the third quarter we were only up by 3, or I think we might have even been tied in the third quarter at one point. But like I was never worried about that game just because you could tell by the momentum of the Tigers team, like they'll get into the swing of things, they'll figure it out. And they eventually did, and they ended up winning. I think it was 34-24 or whatever they did. And I expect a pretty similar result today where Mizzou will be in a little bit of a dogfight in the third quarter, and they'll probably pull out ahead. And we'll get that confidence that you mentioned from that K-State game that propelled us into the majority of last season. I think that this game is just going, like, as long as we win it, and if we can win it big, it's going to be a reassurance like, hey, this is still the Tigers. This is still the same team. We're still here for 2024, and we're going to be making a legitimate push for the playoffs. And I think that that's really going to be the case if we just come out of the gate strong and we just dominate them.
Yeah, and also another thing with that Memphis game is we were also very high coming off the K-State win, and there was a chance for a letdown game immediately after. You don't really have that situation this time because we just haven't really played anyone yet. So I think there is a lot of focus given that this is the first real game of the year. And I think the team is going to be up for it. And also, it's going to be a true home game. Like last year, that game was in the Dome against Memphis. And I like the Dome, and I hope they continue to play games there in the future. I want to see the Dome come back to life. But it was kind of quiet in the Dome for that game. And it's just not the same as Faurot Field.
St. Louis fans aren't loud.
They're very fair weather,
Yeah.
and I'm just St. Louis fans. I'm sure some of them in the comments will get mad, but that's just my opinion. So Boston College. Obviously, their ranking is heavily because of the win over Florida State.
Yeah.
I agree with you that Florida State is just a rather unimpressive team. I think DJU is a very underwhelming quarterback, and I think a lot of people overrated him, and the accuracy was a major issue with him. Boston College also got absolutely bullied up front. Or I'm sorry, Florida State got absolutely bullied up front by Boston College in that game. And that is something I am a tad bit worried about just because of the sheer size that Boston College has on their offensive line going up against our D line. I'm still confident in our guys, but every player on that Boston College offensive line is over 300 pounds. Like, they have a very big, strong offensive line. They can run the football. Castellanos is a running quarterback. But I think if you look at the second level of our defense and those linebackers, this matchup still favors us because I think you're probably going to have a spy on Castellanos, and we have the personnel to do that, whether it's Khalil Jacobs, whether it's Corey Flagg. And that's not mentioning any of the other depth pieces. I think those guys are going to be on their absolute A game. And as long as Mizzou is able to take the runaway from Boston College, there's not too much else they can do on offense. In fact, I think Castellanos, he's hardly had any pass attempts through the first two games. Like, it's mostly been Boston College running the football. He was 9 for 10. Okay, in the game against Duquesne.
I think he only played the first half because he was 9 for 10 for like 270 yards with 4 touchdowns.
Yes, and then against Florida State, he was 10 of 16. So, like, they haven't even thrown the ball that much. They clearly are a team that likes to run. They want to run. And if
I trust our run defense.
I do too.
Our linebacking core and our defensive line, I think that they can go up against just about anybody. Even if Boston College's offensive line is as good as it was advertised against Florida State.
And our one question that we still kind of have about this defense is, will the secondary still look as good as you play against better quarterbacks? Because there's been a few times in the first two games where receivers were able to get open and the quarterback just couldn't hit them. Mm-hmm. But that's not really BC's strength. And if you can get BC to throw the football, I think you'll still be fine. I mean, it's not like their receivers are anything to write home about. Castellanos, obviously a good, talented quarterback, but this team is centered around running the ball. And if you can take that away, you have to feel really good. And if you can get up on them early, like, I think that's another key to this game is starting fast on offense. And one thing that I kind of noticed watching back on the Buffalo game is we actually mentioned that in our post game too. Like, they only ran like the same 3 plays every single time.
Yeah.
It's like very short passing concepts, very basic passing concepts. They ran the ball, a lot of basic outside zone. I do think they held the playbook back a little bit in those first 2 games. You're going to see that really open up. And the thing that I was going to say, what I noted watching Dak on that Buffalo game, was we hardly ran any play action. And if we run more play action against Boston College, I think that our receivers are going to get loose against their secondary. And then it's just up to Brady to be accurate on those deep balls. And I do think those will come. He's not going to hit every single one. There will probably be a couple Brady throws where it's like, oh, come on, man. Like, you need to hit that. But I think you'll see him settle in a little bit. We're going to run a lot more play action in this game. The receivers are going to get open downfield. And also, someone that is returning for this game that I did not expect is the tight end, Brett Norfleet, and that's going to be a huge boost that you haven't really had through the first game and a half.
I mean, he only caught 1 ball in that Murray State game, and he went down hard on that shoulder. I remember seeing it live, and I'm like, ooh, that looked bad. And then he obviously went out and went over into the tent and missed the Buffalo game. I like having him back. It's good that Tyler Stevens is not going to get that much playing time. And somebody that I wanted to mention that we didn't talk about in the Buffalo recap because we didn't have too much time, but Jordan Harris, was the third string tight end, and he got a lot of playing time in that Buffalo game. And I don't think he had any catches,
He had
but
one catch that I do remember.
okay.
He's a
They
big
were
man.
lining him up out wide. He is massive. Jordan
Yes.
Harris is insanely huge, and they were using him out wide at wide receiver for a lot of snaps against Buffalo, and it was really interesting. I kept my eye on him a lot of the time because it was just such a mismatch to see him up against those corners.
He almost kind of reminds me of Darnell Washington from Georgia a couple years
little
ago.
bit. Like, he is a very and he's only a sophomore. So once Tyler Stevens,
okay, here's the other thing. The coaching staff is very high on him. He only started playing football his senior year in high school.
yeah, like
And
dude is a monster of a human being.
there's so much
And the fact that
potential.
we're confident using him out wide, like he was all the way to the sideline on one play. And I remember pointing him out to my dad, and I'm like, what is he doing out there? But I'm interested to see if we use him in this game or really at any point in the season for the future, because I think we can get pretty creative with him if we're that confident to put him out there.
Yeah, he's kind of like having an extra lineman, but he's athletic enough to run routes and catch the ball. Coaching staff is very excited about him. He played quite a bit last year as a freshman, and we stole him from the state of Arkansas. I want to say I think he's from Pine Bluff, Arkansas. I might have to double check that, but yeah, I noticed him too. Like I didn't realize just how big he was until I also saw him line up out wide, and he's going to be a guy that I think progressively gets better throughout the season. And you'll kind of see Tyler Stevens start to fade. I mean, he's still going to be in there for those blocking snaps where he's helping in the run game or whatever, because he does provide some value in that. But too many times still, even through these first two games, Tyler Stevens is getting targeted in the pass game. And it's like, if we continue to do that, we deserve to get grilled when something bad happens.
Yeah. I mean, there's almost no reason in playing Tyler Stevens outside of every now and again whenever we go to two tight end formations and need somebody else to block, because I trust Norfleet to do just about anything. I'm extremely excited for him, and I'm glad that he's back. I think that he'll probably have a few catches in this Boston College game. And if he's the only guy on our team that's really dealing with any sort of injury right now, we're in a pretty good spot through the first 2 weeks. I mean, that's where you want to be, to not have any of your starters really banged up that much outside of Darius Smith, obviously, who tore his ACL. So I'm excited to see this tight end room back at its full strength, because like you mentioned with those play actions, we can go to Norfleet on a lot of play actions, and he's really good at just coming out on a boot and being a massive target that Brady Cook really just can't miss. He's a fantastic safety net to have.
Yeah, and you look, even Bill O'Brien talked about the Mizzou receivers and how he thinks at least 4 or 5 of them are going to the NFL. He acknowledges the amount of talent we have in this wide receiver room, and it's just going to be hard to cover everybody. And I think that's the most lopsided matchup in this game, obviously, because BC, you can get open against their secondary, and that was something that I've noticed a lot of Mizzou fans also pointing about that Florida State game. Was Florida State had receivers open, DJU just couldn't hit them because
he was like 21 of
he was
42
very inaccurate,
or something like that. Like, he was terrible.
Yeah. So, I mean, you look at what we have. Brady Cook, he's due for a big game, a good game, and like even Luther Burden, like he hasn't even had a big game yet receiving the ball.
Luther hasn't done much.
He's due for a big game, and what better time to do it than against a ranked opponent in Mizzou's first serious game of the season?
Yeah, at a very weird kickoff time of 11:45 as well.
Which I'm glad, because I am working 12-hour shifts this week, and I actually have to work on Saturday, but I don't have to work till 6. So, oh my God, I am so thankful that it's an early game. Get it out of the way. But Yeah, no, it's gonna be a really fun, interesting matchup. I think I do respect BC. I think I have a lot of respect for Bill O'Brien as a coach, and I think they're a fundamentally sound team. But this is just one of those games where you're gonna see the gap in athleticism and talent is going to show itself. And Mizzou is a team on a mission this year. And it's kind of funny because we were once Boston College a few years ago going up against, Georgia looking for a chance to upset them.
Yeah.
And we couldn't quite make it happen because in the end, Georgia was Georgia and they had the talent and you knew it was going to come through in the end. And that's just kind of how I see this one playing out.
Yeah. Boston College, they have the ability to give us a run for their money or run for our money because, like we said, they beat FSU going into Tallahassee and winning that game that's no easy feat, and winning it 28-13 and basically dominating them the entire game through the trenches. You have two running backs that Trayshawn Ward and Kai Robichaud, who averaged 4.5 and 6.4 yards per carry in that game. And then you have Thomas Castellanos, who's a massive threat on the ground as well. He went 14 for 73 with a touchdown that game. They have a bunch of guys that they can sub in and sub out at running back. They like to throw a lot of screens. And it's up to the Mizzou linebackers. I think that's the key point of this game is how well do the linebackers tackle, how well do the linebackers sniff out screens, and overall, like we mentioned, how Castellanos hasn't really hit any of those deep shots against Florida State, and Duquesne FCS school doesn't mean too much. So it's really, can we stop him in that intermediate passing game when they do have to throw? And a lot of that is going to come down to Chuck Hicks, Tristan Newson, Corey Flagg, and Khalil Jacobs. Like that's what this game comes down to, I think, is that group of linebackers. And I trust them because, like we were talking about, I don't know if there's a more deep, better linebacker room in the country than those four guys, based off of what we've seen so far and what we saw from Hicks and Newsom at the end of last year.
Yes, and I just look at this defense and the amount of explosive plays that they've limited. I mean, it's just they've been elite at stopping the big play. And if we're going to compare this to the Memphis game from last year against Memphis, there were too many explosive plays allowed in that game from our defense, and we were terrible on third down. And that's kind of what gave Memphis a little bit of hope throughout that game. If you let BC run for 160, 170 yards on you in this game and they get a bunch of big runs, you're going to give them hope. You can't give them hope. But I'm a lot more confident in this defense doing that than I was in last year's defense doing it against Memphis, because of what we've seen through the first two games.
We have a good defensive coordinator now.
Well, and then it's like, okay, the defensive line, they've been beyond what my expectations were for them to start the year. Chris McClellan, he's been everything and more. He's been an absolute mauler. He's been beating his blocks seemingly every other play. Marquise Gracial, I think, has flashed a lot. You have Zion Young, who's been very solid, Johnny Walker, and I think those guys are going to hold it down. And then you just look at the linebackers, and they've been awesome so far. I mean, how could you not trust them? And Corey Batoon and his defensive philosophy of just letting your guys drop back, limiting the explosive plays, trying to create more turnovers instead of taking all these risks by Boston College is not the team that I would try to blitz a ton against. And I don't think you need to. I just think if you just keep doing what you've been doing for the past couple of games, I think you'll be fine.
Yeah. No, and I thought about this with the Memphis game because you mentioned it again. Blake Watson, one of the best running backs in the country last year. In that game, we limited him to 18 carries for 47 yards, 2.6 yards per carry. I just looked that up. But we were able to stop him, and we forced them to pass the ball. And it forced their quarterback to throw. I think it was we got Chris Abrams-Drain had the interception. Then I think there was one more in that Memphis game. But we forced their quarterback to throw the ball. If we can force Castellanos to throw the ball and limit Trayshawn Ward and Robichaud in the run game and we can force them to try and air it deep against us, we should be fine. Like, sure, there might be a few explosive plays and it'll be annoying, but if we force Castellanos to throw 40 times in this game, I think that we win, because I think that our defense, our secondary, our linebacking core, what we've done just running base cover 2, cover 3, match quarters, like what we've been able to do running all of that, and we've held Murray State to not even getting any plays over the 50, and Buffalo only had like 5 or 6 plays over the 50-yard line against us. Like, if we're able to do that against other football schools and limit them that much, I think just running base defenses, if we open up the playbook a little bit, which I think is going to happen, we might be forced to do that. I think that we should be able to limit Boston College and give them something that they haven't seen yet. And really, this is going to be Corey Batoon's first show where we get to see him really put some good film on display.
Well, I think I heard you mention opening up the playbook in this game at the end there, and I also think you just kind of have to, because
you don't want to go 3 weeks into the year and not be using plays that you're going to be wanting to use an SEC play.
Well, it's just you have to get a rhythm. You have to connect on some of these big plays. Like I talked about that one underthrow to Marquise Johnson last week, and how it was a pass interference, and it's like, I wonder if Brady intentionally underthrew that or if it was just truthfully underthrown, because if it was purposefully underthrown, I get it, because you're trying to draw PI and it's a relatively easy play to run. But for the sake of getting a rhythm going with the deep passing game, I hope that wasn't the case. Yeah. And you
don't want to be going into A&M not having the full playbook.
Well, even Vandy, I think Vandy is respectable this year, and it's going to be another game kind of similar to this Boston College game where you're going to have to break some stuff out, because it's not a walk in the park.
Yeah. No, I mean, Vandy beat Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech is a solid ACC team. They're a respectable opponent, but I mean, Vandy looked really good in that game, and I think they played an FCS school last week, and I don't remember who they play this week, but they're going to be based off of just that Virginia Tech game, they're going to be somebody that I'm a little bit more like, you got to be up for that game, because I mean, we saw what they can do. They brought in Jerry Kill as an advisor, and they immediately got good, because that's just the impact that he has.
He's a good coach. Very good coach.
Very.
I think that pretty much sums up our thoughts heading into this matchup. So, Brayden, unless you have any final thoughts, I say we go ahead and get into score predictions for this game.
I just hope that Luther Burden really does have his first massive game of the year. I hope that Carroll and Noel can keep going on the ground game.
I want to see them break off one. We haven't seen a really long run from them yet.
I want one really big 60-yard plus play.
Yes, please give that to us, and a win, and that would be perfect.
Yep.
I'll go ahead and do my predictions first. I said that I don't expect Mizzou to cover. I see them winning by about 14 points. So I'm going to say Mizzou. You see a good offensive display in this game. Defense does their job. Mizzou wins 34-20.
You stole my score.
I think it's a fairly popular score prediction among Mizzou fans right now too.
You said 34-20?
Yep.
I will go 27-13.
Okay, so before we sign off, Brayden, I kind of want to quiz you here. So there are two teams at the top of longest active winning streaks in college football right now. Do you know who those two teams are?
Is it Army and Mizzou?
Mizzou is one of them. The other one plays tonight. I'll give you that hint.
Would it be K-State?
No, it's actually it's Arizona.
It's Arizona. Okay, that makes sense.
So by the end of the night, potentially, Brayden, Mizzou could be the longest active winning streak in all of college football. Isn't that kind of insane to think about?
That would be really weird. I know that Army's up there because they've won like 7 straight or something crazy like that after their really bad start last year. That's why I said them. I knew Arizona was up there as well, but yeah, I mean, I think that K-State has a pretty good shot to beat them tonight. It's in Manhattan, terrible town by the way, and Avery Johnson is terrible, but I think that they.
I was going to say, if they ask him to throw, I think I'm going to take Arizona.
I mean, Kansas State's -7, but I expect them to win that game just because it's in Manhattan and Arizona really hasn't been world beaters. I mean,
their
sure
defense is terrible.
Yeah, they allowed like almost four. I think it was 31 points in the first half to New Mexico. I was watching that game. I'm like, ugh. Like, sure, McMillan is like on the same caliber as Luther and has had those big games already. But it was against New Mexico, and he had to play almost the entire game, which is not an issue that Luther Burden had.
They needed every bit of that 300-yard game from him.
Yeah, like if they didn't get that 300-yard game, they're in danger of losing to New Mexico, who lost to Montana State. And Montana State's a good FCS school, but they were in danger of losing to Montana, or they lost to Montana State, and then they almost went to Arizona and gave them a run for their money in that first 3.5 quarters.
Yeah, Arizona's defense is rough. Oh, also, one more thing I should ask you about before we go. There's major news, Brayden, in college football. The Pac-12 is back. The Pac is back. Yes. The Pac-12 is saved as they're adding 4 teams from the Mountain West that we know of for sure. Maybe a couple more sneak in later on, but we won't spend too long on it. But, I mean, what are your thoughts on the new Pac-12?
I love conference realignment, so I'm excited for the Pac to be back. We get some more Pac-12 after dark with Boise State, Fresno State, Colorado State, and San Diego State. The Pac is now the state conference, as all 6 schools are state colleges. I think that we could see the Pac possibly add UTEP and New Mexico or New Mexico State possibly. But I think that the Mountain West, like there's going to be a lot of dominoes to fall. I'm excited to see what the Mountain West does. I think that they get UTEP and possibly New Mexico State to join, along with Idaho back in the FBS. Getting the Kibby Dome back at the FBS level would be so cool. I think that Sacramento State's another possibility to join the Mountain West. And then for the rest of the Pac, I mean, Memphis might finally get that Power 5. I say that with air quotes. They might finally get that Power 5 invite. Tulane. The Pac-12 could become a really fun conference, and I'm excited to see what it does to the college football landscape.
Yeah, Connor and I were talking about it briefly last night, and it's kind of funny because the little brother school in the state, Missouri State, obviously they were set to move to Conference USA here pretty soon, and that conference may fall apart before they even get there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a pretty solid chance that Conference USA just gets completely depleted just because the Pac is taking schools from the American or more schools from the Mountain West possibly, and then the American obviously loves to go and take Conference USA teams, and I mean, they might be left completely depleted by the end of this, which would really suck for Missouri State and Delaware because they're coming up to the FBS level. I think both of them are coming up next year, right?
Yeah.
Or is Missouri State going to be 26? I forget.
I know Delaware next year,
but yeah, exciting times in college football. It'll be nice to have another FBS school in Missouri. Like, it's crazy that with how many colleges there are that have really good historic football programs, like Northwest Missouri State is one of the best D2 schools ever. UCM, Mules represent, are a pretty solid D2 school as well. SEMO's made the FCS playoffs in the last couple years, and Missouri State hasn't been much, but they got money, so that's why they'll be up at the FBS level.
I mean, there's been multiple NFL players even to come out of UCM over the
Delaney Walker.
Yeah, Delaney Walker being one of them. And then, of course, I've mentioned him before, but Dominic Pooney, now current starting guard for the 49ers, also started out at UCM before transferring to Kansas for a couple of years. So, yeah, it's always been kind of strange how a state like Missouri with two major metro markets has only had one flagship university, but things are changing. So we'll see what happens.
Yep.
We'll go ahead and wrap up there, though. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this preview. Hopefully Mizzou can come out with a win and take care of business this Saturday. If you guys are still watching, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more Mizzou fans can find this. You can check out my work on showmefootball.com. And then, Brayden, anything you want to plug?
I'll continue to plug Show Me Movies, even though I haven't recorded for it in a few months.
Yeah, me neither. But this October, we're back.
Yep. Josh is going to be doing his spooky season movies.
Yes. There's going to be a lot of Terrifier 3 content on there. So check it out, guys. It'll be in the description down below, as always. But we are signing off. MIZ.
ZOU.